Sounds like Europe. Cross-border podcasting.
Hello and welcome to Sounds Like Europe, Cross-Border Podcasting, a project brought to you by WIPA. I am your host, Javi Caminero. In this episode, I would like to show you how podcasts are compatible and easily combined with other forms of entertainment, such as books. For some time now, the most successful books have also been available in audio version, something that allows them to reach a wider audience or to facilitate their consumption for those who want to read them but cannot do so, maybe due to a lack of time. There are also those who simply prefer to listen to someone telling them the stories, even more so if that someone is the author. According to the first edition of the Map of Audio Channels in Europe, presented at the London Book Fair by dos12.com in March 2024, 192 audiobook channels are operating in Europe as of today. The most offered business model in Europe is subscription, followed by on-demand. To understand the current state of audiobooks and their consumption and market in Europe, I am joined by one of the leading experts on the subject, who also happens to be one of the founders of dos12.com. Javier Celaya, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
First of all, Javier, tell me, what's your story and what's your relationship with podcasting?
Okay, so for the last 20 years, I've been working in the publishing sector, helping publishers, librarians, booksellers to understand the benefits of the digital age that we're living in. And especially in the last 10 years, I've been focusing in audiobooks and podcasts in the last 5 to 7 years. And as you said in the introduction, there is more and more crossover between podcasts and audiobooks and books, and then it's becoming a new source of talent that then takes off in different formats.
And what would you say are the main trends in Europe regarding audiobooks today, just to give a little bit of a glimpse to the audience?
Okay, so depending from where you're listening to this podcast in Europe, audiobooks have been part of your ecosystem in different ways. Like, for example, in Northern Europe, they've been having audiobooks for the last 40 years, first in cassettes, then in CDs, then in digital, now in streaming, as well as in Germany or in other parts of Europe. Whereas in Southern Europe, especially in Spain, in Portugal, Italy, and Greece, audiobooks have been a new format in the last 5 years. It's a small but emerging industry. It's almost 1 billion euros turnover every year. There are around 5,000 publishers that produce audiobooks in Europe. And we have close to 250 audiobook titles published in different languages, in English, in German, in French, in Italian. So as I said, it's a small industry, but growing very fast, double digit every single year. For the last 10 years, we had in Europe double digit growth, which, many other industries will envy us for having such a healthy growth.
For this turnover to keep growing, you must have some books that obviously are huge successes. Tell me which audiobook genres are the most listened to here in Europe.
Okay, so again, it depends on which part of Europe you're coming from. For example, in Germany, fiction is the king of content. Basically, up to 75% of what's being consumed in Germany is fiction. Whereas in Spain, we have a much more balanced split. We have fiction and non-fiction, like 55 fiction, 45 non-fiction, as well as in France and other markets, like, for example, in the UK, you have more non-fiction than fiction. This correlates with book selling in print, meaning that people who are listening to audiobooks, first of all, tend to be people who are already reading in print and they want to read more. And an audiobook allows you to read in a format that reading in print could be, a bit uncomfortable or dangerous. For example, riding a bike and reading a book in print could be very dangerous, whereas you can be listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook while you're riding your bike or walking the dog or doing the dishes at home. So, the correlation between the best-selling books in print usually correlates with the best-selling audiobooks.
And what should an audiobook have to be successful? What would you say is the biggest audiobook of all time, to give us an example?
Well, it is the voice and the content, and this is like the chicken and the egg. You never know which is which. But people tend to select an audiobook because they are very interested in that content, fiction and nonfiction, as we said before, or maybe the name of the author. They really like that author, and a new release is out in the market, and they want to follow that. The third key variable to listen to an audiobook is the voice, the narrator of that audiobook. A lot of people choose their next read or next listen based on a narrator's voice that they have discovered, and they love the way that person talks. This happens a lot in radio. A lot of people listen to the same radio channel because they love the voice of that radio channel and the way that person tells the stories. So the same thing happens with an audiobook. So yes, title, author, theme, and voice of the narrator are the keys to success to an audiobook.
And if you had to pick just one audiobook to give an example of how successful an audiobook can get to be, which one would you say?
Oof, this is very difficult because it depends on, as I said, on the very different countries that we have across Europe, and each one of them has their best-selling novel or the best-selling book of the year. One that beats in all the markets is Harry Potter. That one is a success across the board, as we know. So yeah, I will choose Harry Potter because it's a title that everyone knows or has read or seen in the movies. And now in audiobook is having like a second life, put it that way, that a lot of people are either rereading the book in audio or engaging because they have never read the book, they just saw the movie, and now they have an audiobook to engage with the content through this new format.
And what strategies work best when it comes to releasing an audiobook? I mean, do they usually come out at the same time as the original book?
That's one of the keys to success, because the noise that you create in the market when you release a new book, if you release the book in print as well as ebook and audiobook at the same time, at the end, the reader decides which format is the most appropriate to access that content. So the big publishers, the big publishing houses do that effort. It takes a lot of planning ahead. To do an audiobook of, 250 pages, which that's, the normal size of a book that we buy in any bookstore across Europe, is about 6 to 8 hours of audio, and it takes about 2 months to be produced in the studio. So ahead of the publication of the print, you have to parallel plan ahead all this production time in order to make sure that you have both formats in the market at the same time. So yes, big publishers make concurrent publications. Independent publishers usually come out with the audiobook maybe 3 to 4 months after the release of the print book.
And do publishers, as of today, and authors have audio in their thoughts when publishing a book? Will there ever come a time when authors write their stories with the sound of the audio version in mind?
Yes, more and more. There are more writers, especially the younger generations ones, the ones that have, born in this new digital age, and they fully understand the potential of audio as a storytelling format. And it is called audio first, meaning it's a story that has been written for audio first, and then it could be published later on in print or in ebook. And this audio first generation, we see more and more writers thinking, as you said, in their heads when they're writing the story, they are thinking about the audio version. And when they write, they put on the margins notes to the producer, meaning that I want a sound effect here, or I want a third voice here, or I want whatever music here. And then, of course, all that has to be readapted for the print version, because that comes in your head from an imagination point of view.
Yeah, and that will lead eventually, to some authors transitioning into writing some fictions for audio users only, and maybe not even thinking about having that in a book.
I fully agree with your observation, Javier, because more and more we're seeing that the crossover between, for example, fiction podcasts and audio first audiobooks. This new type of writing. Sometimes you cannot even distinguish if it's a podcast, if it's an audiobook, because, as I said, it doesn't belong to a book. The origin of the story is not a book. So I think this crossover, to me, is very creative, and it will allow more and more creators to engage with audio as a storytelling format, and we'll have better and new stories in the market that we're going to discover through fiction podcasts, audiobooks, audio originals, or whatever they want to call them. But at the end is audio that it is extremely well produced.
And before we finish this episode, Javier, I would like for you to answer to me the classic Sounds Like Europe questions. These are 3 questions that every guest has answered in this podcast. So, first of all, what would you say is the most important podcast in your country right now? In this case, we are both Spanish, so maybe let's see if we agree, or if you just want to give out a recommendation for the people listening.
But the most important in terms of listenings, of the people who are the most listened ones in Spain, or the one that I think is the most important personally?
Yeah, maybe the one that you think is the most important personally in terms of the impact that it can have when people listen to it.
Okay, I listen to a lot of what we call audio journalism podcasts, meaning that is podcast that allows you to understand, the different issues that we're living worldwide or in Europe with the war in Ukraine or in Gaza, whatever. So to me, a podcast like Un Tema al Día is extremely relevant in order to understand the day-to-day issues of the Spanish society. But in Spain, the most important, the most listened podcasts are what we call conversational podcasts, which are very big in Spain in terms of listening. Especially in the younger generations, millennials and Zs, they really embrace this conversational podcast.
When's your favorite moment to listen to podcasts?
When I walk the dog. After working, going back home with the dog, I disconnect listening to podcasts, and I really enjoy it.
That's your moment of the day. And just to finish the interview, what's something that makes you stop everything you are doing at any given moment and go listen to a podcast?
If something big has occurred in society worldwide, I really want to know the insights, and I usually go for those podcasts that give you those insights, and that's when I stop and I want to know from a knowledge point of view what's going on and try to understand better the situation.
Javier Celaya, thanks a lot for being here in Sounds Like Europe and for helping us learn more about audiobooks.
It was great having this conversation, and thank you for the invitation.
And to everyone on the other side, I've been your host, Javi Caminero. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll come back in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Sounds Like Europe, Cross-Border Podcasting is a WePod podcast funded by the Creative Europe programme. Hosted and written by Javi Caminero, sound design by Manu Tomillo, coordinator Alexander Damiano Ricci, executive producer Anna Ribera.